I still rent like all my big equipment, and that's once again my personal situation. It just makes sense, kind of. But I didn't do that for like the first couple of years. Like I would be shoveling. This was more so like side projects, right?
Sure.
That I did. And on those side projects, after working Monday to Saturday, I would then after Saturday work, go work on these side projects and hand dig things. And then on Sunday, hand dig all day. And I tell people like, don't hand dig. It doesn't make sense. But as somebody who was completely unfamiliar with the industry, knew nothing, I didn't even know I could rent equipment, right? When you're not even involved in the industry and the install side of things, it would have really helped for me to go from supplier to work for an installer to see like what was possible and what it was capable, and then start my business. Because then I would have known, oh, I can rent a piece of equipment for this.
Sure. Welcome back to another episode of the Cost of Doing Business podcast. I am here with the one and only Mike Pletz from Ontario. We're up here at the Landscape Ontario Show Congress, and we're literally sitting in the hotel lobby room getting this done, and then we got dinner after this. So
Awesome.
But we just got done wrapping up recording an episode for your podcast, How to Hardscape.
Absolutely.
But yeah, looking forward to getting into it here with Mike, picking his brain on his story and what he's doing. And my first memory, or my first introduction to you, Mike, was when Matt Heiner, the artist, connected us, and we had a conversation about just what we're doing at SynkedUP and all of that. And I know you had your podcast; you had me on then.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's my first encounter. But introduce yourself and give us an idea of what it is you do. I know you've got many things going. So what is it that Mike Pletz does?
If somebody asks me what I do, I simply just say I'm a hardscaper.
Yeah.
And that kind of envelops what I do online too.
Yeah.
I just try to marry the two.
Yeah.
I've always been interested in like the online world and creating things. So I've always created things online since I was in high school. So that kind of just developed over the years. But when it comes to what I do offline, I'm a hardscaper. I have a very small hardscaping business. Love being in the field, love building things. It's not something that I grew up doing until I was in university. So that's kind of how I became a hardscaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how many people do you like? Is it just you, or do you have some help?
This year was just me and two part-time employees.
Okay.
But all other years before this year, I had at least one full-time employee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that was my memory anyway.
Yeah.
So
I'm just in a tough personal position because my wife and I don't have like a physical location where we're gonna stay. So we're not at the point where we've created roots to, this is where I'm going to create a physical location business, because we could pick up and move across the country like tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're just kind of waiting for our next steps in what our personal life is. So it's difficult to decide to, okay, I'm going to put my stamp in this territory without knowing what tomorrow might bring.
Okay, I was actually going to ask you that. Why stay at that small model? So it's more of a personal thing of like, okay, I'm not sure I'm going to stay here forever.
Yes.
I want to maintain the flexibility of going somewhere else.
Yeah.
And when you do feel like you actually are where you want to be, will you stay the size you are, or would you grow?
So the plan is to have at least two crews. One crew doing lift and relays, because that's kind of where I started, and I love that business model. And one crew doing more design build, and using that lift and relay crew as a training ground to level people up into the design build crew, and have that lift and relay, because that's a great training ground to pick up pavers, learn how to grade, how to screed, and put them back down, and get that poly sand and edge restraint. And then that crew can always fill in spots for the design build crew, because they can come in and do the poly sand and final touches for the design build crew.
Yeah.
So I see those two being more harmonized. And wherever I decide to scale from there, I also want to kind of marry the how to hardscape into everything. So if I have a great employee that's on a crew but isn't really made for the hardscape life, well, I've got this other opportunity here for you. Maybe your skills are more related to online space and helping us with our digital marketing or whatever we're doing with how to hardscape. So I see it more as an ecosystem.
Yeah, that's actually that's very fascinating. Like what is your dream and your vision for how to hardscape and your online part of that ecosystem?
What is my dream for that? I'm bad with dreams. I don't specifically have like, this is where I'm going. I just have dominoes that fall as they're presented to me. And I either decide to pursue a door that opens or close a door, maybe temporarily, and go all in on a certain thing. I've kind of have had a roadmap as to how I started How to Hardscape, but I don't have like a North Star as to this is where we're headed. We have a North Star as a mission statement, but we don't have like, this is where we're going. I started with a website in 2019. I knew I wanted to start a podcast because it just made sense to have, for contractors, being in a truck, being on site, have an earbud, great way to get information.
Right.
So it went website, podcast with the Instagram page, and then I knew once I got that podcast going, I wanted to start YouTube. So we started the YouTube channel 2 years ago. So it's sort of just like dominoes falling as I go. Yeah.
Yeah, and which one do you spend more time on, the online or the actual install?
Oh, during the season, definitely install.
Yeah.
Winter is my time to like make that back catalog, right?
Sure.
Videos, obviously, like I need to do as I do hardscaping. Here it is. I have a hardscape installation business and I have an online business. And in order for me to have time for both, they need to complement each other.
Yeah, right. They can't be too,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So everything that my online business does is also there to serve my hardscape business.
Yep.
And that's YouTube for marketing. And it's amazing how many leads I get now from my YouTube channel.
That's crazy. Your how-to videos.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, not How to Hardscape, but I Am a Hardscaper.
Yeah, okay,
Because two separate entities.
Yeah.
But yeah, my I Am a Hardscaper videos, like we're small, but I do believe that, especially if you change your setting to an education channel, type of channel, and then you can target a certain, like, then it asks you, okay, where are you located? And I chose Canada, and I think it pushes you to more local before it pushes you worldwide.
Interesting,
right?
I didn't know that.
So it is interesting, and I don't even push my hardscape business on it. I sometimes wear my Ever After landscaping hat.
Okay.
So people clue into that, and then it causes them to research me and then pursue me. So it's a good pre-qualifier too.
Yeah,
I'm not
absolutely.
saying
if they're going that hard,
yes,
exactly. Yeah.
And they really want.
Yeah. That's pretty smart. That's pretty cool. So okay, so not the dream aspect of the online, but what do you have any? What's your plans for the next 2 years? Let's say that.
Plans for the next 2 years. Go harder with YouTube and really capitalize on that, because I do feel like once you got the momentum going, it doesn't make sense to kind of let it coast.
Right.
I do think that I want to get that going more and do a little bit more video content with that. Podcast is at a point where it's like very consistent. At times I've thought like, maybe I can do 2 episodes a week and maybe get more listeners, but I don't think that's the case. I thought like the best solution to that was Not Our Finest Hour with the 3 other guys, right? Because it's a totally different...
Oh, hardscape comedy.
Yes, yeah. It's just a totally different like aspect to what I'm doing, as opposed to doubling down on something that's already working.
It's another genre, or
yes, absolutely, yeah. So I thought that was like a perfect opportunity when that came up. And like, what does the next 2 years look like? Just keep on making content that's helpful to the industry and that will serve both my online business and my hardscaping business. I don't know if that quite answers what you're asking.
Yeah, so my follow-up to that is like, so what is your who are you speaking to when you're making content? Mm-hmm. Is it the kid out of high school that wants to get started and wants to figure out how do you hardscape? How do you do this stuff? Is that like an educational? Is that what you're
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the startup business. Like the first thing in our How to Hardscape episode is we teach people how to start and grow their hardscaping business. So it's absolutely the startup business that we are definitely like aimed at. But it doesn't mean that people that have a business can't listen in to the episodes where I have a hardscape business owner on. And we talk, or you and my conversation, which is like budgeting and really doing a deep dive into the different specifics of budgeting and how that can serve your business. That's probably not something that a startup business owner really needs to get into immediately. They just need the basics. So there is content. It's just I'm not the one talking about it.
Sure.
I know what I know, and if somebody asks me about employees, I say no. I'm not going to give you an answer that I heard and can regurgitate on a podcast, because I can definitely do that. But no, I'm not even going to give you that. Here's the person that you can speak to. If you want to talk about marketing with me, more than happy to. If you want to talk about budgeting and estimating, more than happy to. Hardscaping. Specifics to hardscaping, would love to, but like the things that I don't know, I'm not going to regurgitate something and throw at you.
Yeah, stay in your lane, that kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. No, it's, and like, you know, from a personal aspect, if you wanna be in another lane, you know, knock yourself out, go all out, but like, don't try to be something you're not, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because I see that so much online. It's bad.
Yeah, we can take a hard left turn on this podcast.
Yes, we could. I'm sorry to bring that
up. Well, some of my kind of go-to, my favorite questions to ask everyone that I have on the podcast here is, what is the greatest challenge you've ever faced or you ever overcome?
My greatest challenge, business-wise?
Sure. Yeah, Phil, you can decide where you want to draw the lines around that. But yeah, business-wise for sure.
Like, my consistent business challenge has always been hiring, but that's just because I need a specific person in my business. They have to have a valid driver's license, which it can sometimes be difficult.
Blows my mind.
They also need to be willing and able to drive longer distances to projects, right? Because I started my business in Kitchener, which is an hour away from Toronto, and it's still where I get most of my word of mouth and where I travel to, from Toronto, right? But I'm also slowly inching closer and closer to Toronto, so they need to be able to drive anywhere from Kitchener to an hour away.
Yeah.
And that's difficult to find. I've had luck a few times and tried to keep them on, but it hasn't worked out. So I would say like that's a recurring challenge. The biggest challenge would be for me a certain instance. Man, that's a tough one. That's probably it. Employees. Like, I try to take on challenges. I try to get out of my comfort zone. Like, I'm an introvert, so me like talking on a podcast is even difficult. But I know that if I take on those challenges and I get out of my comfort zone, it's just gonna help me like grow.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Like, lean into lean in and grow.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that when you see that in people, right?
Yes.
As opposed to, well, I'm not good at that. I'm not even gonna try.
Yeah.
Which, fine, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, but just the pursuit of personal growth and development, always pushing yourself is, I don't know, personally I admire that. You know what I mean?
Building a pond was a challenge.
There you go.
but then I look back on it and like I enjoyed it. So like it's difficult for me to like pinpoint a certain challenge because I look back on everything and like I'm glad I did that. There hasn't been anything that I look back on, and it could be like a complete failure, but I don't look back on it like, oh, that was hard, that was difficult. I look back on it like, man, that really set me up to wherever I am today.
On the employee thing, the reoccurring challenge, is there anything you could speak to as to, hey, I've tried this, I've tried that, or don't do this, or actually this seemed to work. The next time I have the next opportunity, I'm going to try this. Like, anything to speak to on that?
So as far as employees go, it's never been something that I've like doubled down on and been like, okay, I need to hire somebody this way, and this tends to bring in this type of employee, which really sets me up for this. What I have done is exit interviews with those that have been on, and the number one thing that I get recurring is, I knew nothing about this industry. It would have really helped before I started with you to have some sort of background knowledge on what the hell a screed bar is, or like any of this terminology that you're throwing at me. It would have been nice to have like a setup to then come onto site and kind of understand what that project that's grass is going to turn into a patio. So then I built like training courses. So like going back to everything that I do online has to complement my Hardscape business. Those training courses I use to train and onboard employees.
Super awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And honestly, those kinds of, I call that building systems and processes, and that is what sets you free from the entrepreneurial prison where you're the only one that can do do a certain thing. You know? So yeah, that's really good. What's an accomplishment or an achievement you're most proud of?
I don't know. I don't get too proud of many accomplishments.
Or what did you felt good. That's all.
Felt good. Okay, so the biggest thing that I get is people reaching out for some sort of advice that I can actually give, that I don't like push away to somebody else, and them implementing that and coming back and thanking me for what however I helped them,
Yeah.
right? But then like one step beyond that is people reaching out and saying that they went through a tough time, and them implementing that got them out of that tough time. And then even with like the Not Our Finance Hour podcast, somebody messaged me and said they were going through a tough time, and just having that comedy around like what we do really helped them through that tough time.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Which I would have never thought.
Right. It's like, okay, so like comedy, but you never know, like what is maybe a release or something that helps someone feel better.
Right.
So that's an interesting thing about content creation is people do, I don't know, find relatability or find camaraderie or brotherhood or whatever you want to call it, in content, and yeah, you get into the whole online world thing and virtual versus in person, but it's I know what I think I know enough of what you're saying to know what you mean of how that feels good to know that you helped someone in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nothing that I would have ever honestly suspected, having started to what I, even before this online thing, that I could even help somebody, right?
Yeah.
But then you pick up things as you go, and you learn, and you test, and you fail, and then you pick yourself back up, and eventually you have enough scar tissue that you can help somebody that's just starting out. Hey, do it this way.
Yeah,
this is going to help you.
Exactly. Yeah. And on that note, the other question I always like to ask is if you could go back to day one and do it all over again, what is one thing you would do differently?
I would have roots set up somewhere that I knew that I would start a physical location business and know that and be able to double down on it from the very beginning.
So
it'd be nice to have a business where I know I'm living.
Yeah. So it's like it's killing you. Like I want to grow, but
yes,
yeah.
It's it is tough, but beyond that, what is one thing I kind of know now? Wait, what was the question again?
Yeah, well, if you could go back to day one, your day, whatever day it was that you started your business, and you what would you tell yourself?
Okay, so I still rent like all my big equipment, and that's once again my personal situation. It just makes sense, kind of. But I didn't do that for like the first couple of years.
You bought?
No, I didn't even rent equipment.
Oh.
For like the first year, I would say. Like I would be shoveling, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And this was more so like side projects, right?
Sure.
That I did. I worked for a stone supplier. We actually got into the industry around the same time. I worked like for 7 years. And on those side projects, after working Monday to Saturday, I would then, after Saturday work, go work on these side projects and hand dig things. And then on Sunday, hand dig all day. And I tell people like, don't hand dig.
Don't
right?
bother.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But as somebody who was completely unfamiliar with the industry, knew nothing, it didn't even make sense to me. I didn't even know I could rent equipment, right? When you're not even involved in the industry and the install side of things, it would have really helped for me to go from supplier to work for an installer to see like what was possible and what it was capable, and then start my business. Because then I would have known, oh, I can rent a piece of equipment for this.
Sure, yeah. And I'm curious, when you realized that you could rent, was there a like $500 a day? No way, I'll hand dig.
No, because it
so
made total sense.
It wasn't that.
Absolutely.
It's like either I build a customer to dig all day, or I bill the customer $500 and then I work all day.
Because at that point, I'd already done enough. I'd understood enough about budgeting and estimating. Back then, when I was hand digging, everything was $1,000. I have a client that I did a front patio for, and they asked for a quote, and I was like, $1,000. And then they're like, okay. After that project was done, their neighbor needed a side walkway, and they were there too, like both neighbors. And I was like, yeah, that's $1,000. And then that neighbor wanted something done in the back, and I was like, it's $1,000. And then this neighbor's like, is everything $1,000?
That is hilarious. how big of a difference was there in the scope of those three?
Oh, so they got easier and easier. So the scope got smaller and smaller, but it was still $1,000.
That is hilarious.
So that was me hand digging. And then like once I finally went on my own and I was free from supplier life, it probably took me like a good solid 3 to 6 months before I really got into renting equipment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. What is the most common mistake, or what is a common mistake that you see a lot of people making needlessly, or it's like it's such an easy thing to avoid?
I would say estimating is just, like knowing your numbers is just such a cliche thing, but things are cliche for a reason, right? People just struggle with that when, just like I struggled with knowing I could rent equipment. You don't know what you don't know. So when you're starting a business and you love the install side of things, you don't necessarily know how to price yourself properly, right? So like knowing your numbers is probably my scapegoat because it's just, everybody needs to know it.
Yeah,
Everybody needs to know how to recover your overhead. And I think like the biggest thing I hear is overhead is just the cost of doing business. And that's what I heard when I was just starting up. And I was like, it didn't quite click for me with that. It didn't make sense. Like, why should I be eating this? I should be making money on this rather than having to eat it. And this is the cost of doing business. Or your podcast title.
The cost of doing business. Yeah.
But also other people that say, oh, my equipment's going to start making me money after it's paid off. That's like another big thing too.
Yeah. Not really.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
Maintenance doesn't work like that.
And
you should be making money on that equipment from the time you have it.
Yes, and one thing that popped into my head as you were talking is like, you don't have to become a nerd or a spreadsheet geek or an accountant to know your numbers. By the way, that's gonna be a really good clip when I tag you on the Not Our Finest Hour podcast where you make fun of know your numbers. but jokes aside, my point is you don't have to be like, if you're the guy like, dude, I just love making beautiful stuff. I don't understand that. I'll never understand it. You don't have to. In this day and age, there are free tools. You can literally answer questions, plug in answer like, what do you pay in insurance a year? Answer the question and plug in the number, and bam, you spit out your output, your hourly rate. Like, you can literally, it's literally that simple.
Yeah.
You don't even have to understand what's going on in the background or in the math. And so that's my I don't know, I guess my bone to pick with, like, you don't have to be an expert.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a spreadsheet or a math nerd. Like, you can literally just answer a bunch of questions, do it for free.
I think the most difficult thing for anybody is not knowing what you don't know. So like, the internet has everything that you need for free.
Yeah, knowledge is not. Yeah, it's like information or knowledge is no longer the bottleneck.
Exactly.
It's readily available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but what's difficult is knowing what to search for if you don't know what's the solution.
Yeah, it's like, how do I translate my pain or my challenge into a Google search?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just like what you have to find out, discover, and then you can have any information that you could ever want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I would say to that, like, not knowing what you don't know is probably the most effective thing. Like, the people that I see that skyrocket to incredible success the fastest, or they have a mentor.
Yeah.
That's someone that they can just like be unvarnished, totally don't have an ego to protect. Like, how do I do this? How do I fix this? How do I get better at this? What do you think? That's super, super valuable if you can find someone. And if you don't have anyone in your world that can help you do that, go to events like this, network, reach out to people like, man, I've been really loving following your content. I love your projects. Like, and can I buy you lunch, or can I come by and visit you, or whatever? Like, just put yourself out there.
Yeah.
That can be very, very effective.
There's a hack to not having to pay for a mentor. Start a podcast, right? Or just hit somebody up that's local to you and go to their shop, or ask them if you could spend a day with them, a ride along of some sort. I know there's local companies that would love to help somebody that's just starting out, that wants to start their business. And it's from those people that you'll get answers from, but you'll get more questions than you have answers. And though at least you know what the questions are.
Yeah.
At least now you know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And now you can research from those questions.
It's funny, even going to any conference or any whatever, like in my experience, it wasn't the seminar, it wasn't the talk, it wasn't the thing, it wasn't the product at the booth, it was always the networking that genuinely provided value. Like
yes.
in the years that I was at Tussie Landscaping, we would go to a show together, like a group of us. So that was one thing that the owner of the company, Steve and Matt, the owners did, was they took us along, which was fantastic. Which actually, if you ask me, is why they have the business they have today. It's like the people in the business, bought in, right? Emotionally or whatever. But like the whole thing of what I was getting at was going to those kinds of events and not trying to drink from a fire hose and not spill a drop. But just, sure, write down fill a notepad full of notes. Write down 30 things that you want to do. But then when you get home, pick one.
Yeah.
One. Mm-hmm. Not even two. One.
Yeah.
When you have completed the one, now you can go on to number two.
Yes.
Don't try to do two at once.
Yep.
And even better is pick it together with your team.
Right.
Because then you got buy-in.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's all top down, like, hey, I want to do this, and it's like everybody kind of rolls their eyes, like, I don't know why he wants to do this. They didn't catch the vision that you had at the event. Well, first of all, take them along, and then together pick the one thing you're going to do when you get home.
Yeah. And then even beyond that is, you talked about networking. I was always, like, I'm introverted. I know myself. I'm introverted. If I go to an event, it's going to be hard for me to just talk to somebody.
Yeah.
So I started a podcast because that forces me to talk to people, right?
Yeah.
And then now that I've got a podcast, I've got a face and a name. And if I go to an event, I can see that face and name and introduce myself.
It's opportunities.
Yeah. So just know yourself. Be kind of self-aware. I try to be self-aware. And that's one of those things that I was self-aware about. So I started a podcast to get myself out of the comfort zone, but also to meet people, because I knew that if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be at an event and shaking Weston's hand.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's how I know you.
Yeah.
It's a podcast. So to your point.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, on that note, where can people learn more about the stuff that you do, the content that you have? Like, how would you tell someone to dive into the How to Hardscape world or I Am a Hardscaper world?
Yeah, I mean, if you just go to How to Hardscape anywhere, you'll find it, like any social media, and that's just a good place to start. Each of our platforms is designed for different purposes. For example, our website, if you're more in tune to reading, we've got free courses on the website as well. If you need more visual content that's going to help you from step to step to step, that's I Am a Hardscaper on YouTube. And if you want a inspiration for design build, that's How to Hardscape on Instagram. So like I designed it so each of these different platforms has its own mission statement, which helps.
That's kind of cool. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of, you stay consistent on each platform.
Yes.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay, well, hey, thanks for coming on to the Cost of Doing Business show.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you. And let's go have some steak. Let's go have some dinner. How's that sound?
Beauty. Thanks, Les.
Okay, cheers.